Hello, I'm Nadia Al-Samarrie with Diabetes Health TV. If you've been thinking about what stocks to invest in the diabetes segment, today's guest will give you some answers. David Kliff, the founder of the Diabetic Investor, will share with us today how he looks at diabetes companies, how he evaluates them, and we're going to ask him for a few tips and some recommendations. So stay tuned. Before we get started, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click on the icon to get notified of our next video. Welcome to my show, David.
Well, it's great to be here, and I'm glad that I could return the favor since you were on my podcast, so it worked pretty good.
Oh, yeah, and that sounded really great. That was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it really was. It got a good reception, too.
Oh, good. So tell us how you got started with Diabetic Investor. You've been in the business for years and you're the publisher and you write an investment letter targeted towards the diabetes segment. So tell us what got you started and then I have a host of questions for you later.
Okay. I was diagnosed in my mid-30s, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife and I went to an educational
class
at a high school. And
wow.
We didn't know anything about diabetes at the time.
And
and during the lunch break, people asked me what I did for a living. And back then I was managing money for a living. And so they started asking me about all these companies, and I never even heard of half of these companies. So I decided I said, handing out business cards, and I said, I'll do some research and I'll get back to you. Now, you got to remember, this was late 80s, something like that, whenever it was. And so back then, two things were pretty apparent. Number one, a lot of these companies weren't even covered by analysts. And the few that were, they had no clue what we go through every day.
Right, it's true.
So I kept looking for better investment research. And I couldn't find anything. And one day I happened to be in my office with a client of mine who happened to work at Abbott, but wasn't in Abbott Diabetes, just happened to work at Abbott. And I was kind of, saying that, he said, if you think there's a market for this, why don't you do it yourself? So I'm like, okay. So I started writing Diabetic Investor really as a hobby.
And you kept your other business.
Yeah, I kept my other business. And then, so it was to tell you how long ago this was, Diabetic Investor was a print publication, which, that tells you, that dates me right there.
Yeah, publishing has changed.
I believe back then I was charging, I think, $69 a year. And then, I don't know, I got picked up really quickly in, all of a sudden I'm in the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, Money Magazine. So this little hobby that I was doing was all of a sudden becoming a business.
Yeah.
And so I came home one day and I said to my wife, I want to sell my money management firm and I want to run Diabetic Investor full time. And I said, I'll make you two promises. I said, I'll get enough money for selling my company so that we're fine. And I said, if it doesn't work after 2 years, I'll do something else. And she said, go ahead, do it. This is what you like to do. And, the rest is kind of like history. Just kept growing.
Great. I have to say, that's a great story. I've known you for decades and I really didn't know that story. That's really wonderful.
Yeah. So if it wasn't for Deb, I wouldn't be doing this.
That's great. So when you got into the industry, you've been in the industry like me for a long time and you've seen so much. You've seen companies come and go. And you've looked at companies probably as someone that lives with diabetes, but as someone you look at companies as being innovative, how in touch they are with patients. So tell us, like, when you approach a company, and this is for people that really don't know how to look for, they don't know what, for the lack of a better word, the principles that you want to look for in terms of an investment. What are the different things that you should look at? And if they have certain keys, it's like, hey, if they have this, you should put this in the watch pile.
Well, I think, the first thing I'm looking for is management talent.
Interesting.
This is a very difficult business. it's multifaceted. I don't care whether you make a drug, a device, an app, whatever it is, you're navigating a complex maze of, reimbursements, payers, doctors, CDs, patient. I mean, it's not easy. And if the team that you assemble doesn't understand the holistic view of this, I don't care how good the technology is, the company probably isn't going to do well. So that, I mean, talent to me, and I write this all the time. There really isn't enough talent. But when you find it, it's great when you find it.
It's true. I know, now that you mention that, it's true, because I've seen some companies that have had an incredible device, medical device, and it just seems like every time they get their hands on it, they ruin it. And it's almost like the kiss of death. It's like, oh no, they took that great device.
Well, I almost believe some of these people could screw up a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but so once I get past like the management, and to be honest with you, I don't even look at if there's an unmet medical need.
Oh, interesting.
Just because, like, just by way of example, right now, hybrid closed loop insulin pumps are all the rage.
Right.
Which they should be, quite honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Yet the first one that came out, as innovative as it was, is not the best one.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there is a copycat nature to this business.
Right. I've seen that too. It's true. Even with accessories or features, you can see everyone for the blood glucose companies. We've seen this over time. Like, LifeScan was the first one that had 250 readings, and then everybody else started adopting more readings in the memory.
And so, if you've got, I'm more concerned about, can they build it? Can they sell and support it? And most importantly of all, is somebody going to pay for it?
Right.
So
that's where the team comes in too, is the person that can sell it to the health insurance companies.
I don't think most patients understand how our healthcare system really works. People go into, a Walgreens, a CVS, wherever, to pick up their scripts, for example. And, they have no clue what it took to get that drug into their hands at the cost that they're paying. And that cost is not really determined by the drug company at all. There's rebates that have to be paid. There's formulae you have to worry about.
So you saying, like, as it's going through the approval process, that every person that touches it has to monetize it?
I don't want to say everybody has to monetize it. Yes, you have to get it through the FDA, which is no easy task.
Right.
But then from that point forward, yes, it's kind of like, it's almost like what I call a VAT tax, a value added tax. Every step in the chain, money's going somewhere.
Right.
And like, just by way of example, there's a lot of people who complain about, quote unquote, the high cost of insulin out of pocket. And they blame like either Lilly or Novo Nordisk. Well, Lilly and Novo Nordisk don't set what comes out of the patient's pocket. Insulin happens to be one of the highest rebated drugs. I believe it's the fourth most rebated drug.
And how is it rebated? Because the patients aren't seeing the rebate.
So here's how this kind of convoluted system works. So Lilly goes in, and I'll just use Lilly as an example, but Novo does the same thing. And it doesn't really matter what drug it is. So they walk into let's say Aetna or United or Anthem, or it doesn't really matter. And they say, okay, this is our list price for insulin. Okay. Well, in order to get on formulary, because that's critical.
And explain to people what the formula is. I don't know that.
Formulary. So when you have private insurance, or even Medicare for that example, what you pay is based on what level of formulary you're at. There's all different tiers.
So it's like which health insurance plan you're on and what your
Exactly.
copayment is.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you get on tier 1, which is the cheapest tier, okay, what do? It's a negotiation. They say, okay, we're going to discount our price by X%, and then we're also going to rebate you, okay, another X%. So, so let's just talk in hypotheticals. Let's say the list price, which nobody pays, is $100.
Okay.
Then they discounted 30%, so now we're down to $70, and then they rebate another $30. So now, all Lilly gets out of that is $40.
Right.
Okay. The rebate doesn't go to the patient. The rebate goes to the pharmacy benefit manager. So then the patient walks into Walgreens and finds out, okay, I have a high deductible plan. So I got to pay for my, until I hit, let's say $1,000, I got to pay out of pocket. I have very good health insurance. So I get, when I refill my insulin prescription, it only costs me, I think it's like $30. And I get 5 vials of insulin. But not everybody has a plan like that.
Right. Yeah. Or they limit how many vials you can take a month.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's a complex maze of rules and hurdles, and now obviously if you don't have insurance, it really sucks because
right.
Walgreens, CVS, whoever it is, they're going to make you pay through the nose because they make money doing that. I mean, this is what most people have to separate out is there's the chronic disease of diabetes.
Right.
And then there's the business of diabetes. And those two things don't always mesh very well. So, and, so I think that too many people, get caught up in things they really can't control. And, you have to understand how this whole, listen, it costs a drug company millions, more like $1 billion to develop something good. Okay. And 7 out of 10 drugs fail. Okay.
Wow. That's high. So it only has a 30% success rate.
Yeah. So people want continual innovation, which they always do. Well, it's got to be paid for somewhere. Doesn't,
right.
Or
paid for eventually.
Well, yeah.
Right.
And so I understand why people can be upset, but yet you can't have one without the other. This is how capitalism works. And, I think that, in order to, we right now, I've seen so much innovation over the last, 30 years, it's ridiculous. And I'm not saying it's easy to be a diabetic. It sure as hell was a lot easier when I first started. And the tools are better, the drugs are better, the information's better.
And there's more of it. It's everywhere. You can access it any time of day.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Who would have thought 30 years ago that we literally would be walking around with a computer in our hand?
Yeah.
What is the?
Well, now I can speak on my my watch. I can get directions when I'm driving. It gives me audio. It's pretty amazing. I love it.
Yeah. Well, think about what every patient does when they're first diagnosed. They go to Google.
And, right. That's right.
And and listen, when you and I first started, I believe, now I don't know this for a fact, but I think Children with Diabetes was probably the first real diabetes website
Hmm.
that I remember. But now, I mean, oh
I'm
my,
thinking the JDRF or JDF had something, but the Children with Diabetes was the first really kind of, there was something about it that made them more personal, where the
yeah,
JDF was more of an organization, but
right,
Children with Diabetes with Jeff Hitchcock, he did, I mean, again, he's like you, he lives it, it's real.
yeah,
You can't really create a business model that is as good as as Children with Diabetes
yeah.
unless you constantly try, everyone that's involved has a child with diabetes. It's
Well, yeah,
just, it's a different mindset.
but think about it now. There must be, I don't know how many websites there are.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know how many blogs there are.
You're
We got
right.
Facebook now, we got Twitter now, we got
Yeah.
Instagram now. We have all these things, and so it, and all of the organizations, you know, uh, TCOYD is,
Yeah.
Beyond Type One. There's all of these, great organizations that, they run conferences, they have websites, so the day, like, it's
Well,
so
now
easy.
I think now we're inundated. And I think for people with diabetes, what I know for me with my Ask Nadia column, what I recommend to people is to go online and look for people that fit your need. Because not every, I mean, there are lots of people out there and there are lots of great people, but just because they're great doesn't mean you connect with them or you can hear their message or you can
Yeah,
relate to them.
and you know
It's
what?
a very personal, so in some ways I think it's great that we have such a broad group of people that, like, for me, I don't have diabetes, but as you know, I've lived with a partner with type 1 and 4 generations of type 2 diabetes, so it's very personal for me, and I tell people this: no one ever grows up and says, I want to grow up and do something in the diabetes industry. It's just not, you just, you kind of
Doesn't
bumble
work
your
that
way.
way, does it?
You just bumble your way into it, kind of like you did,
Well,
like I did.
but see, you're a great example of what um, Steve Edelman, who runs TCOYD here in San Diego, um, they've called them type threes, because when you're like my family, even though they didn't have it, they had
Right.
diabetes.
Right.
They had to know what they had to know what hypoglycemia was, what DKA is, because your entire family lives with it, whether
Right.
and it
Right. You're part of the support system.
exactly, and either you're a benefiter or not, and
Right. And, and type 3 also has other meanings, as you know, it's also for, some organizations like the Alzheimer considers type 3 as a glucose intolerance in your brain. And then there's an urban legend, I looked it up, and type 3s, if you're going out with someone and you're too sweet on them or something like that. And I'm like, really? Wow.
yeah, see, I live in my world of diabetes, something I know.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. So tell us more. So you have talent, formulary. What else do you look at?
um, I'm actually looking 5 years ahead.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll give you some good examples. Like right now, continuous glucose monitoring is the hottest thing going. Okay, so obviously, you look at a company like Dexcom, and it
Right.
checks all the boxes.
Right.
They have a great management team. They have a great product. They have excellent patient access. They have a full pipeline of new things coming.
Right. They're
And
innovative. And I think one of the things to me that really stands out about Dexcom is that they seem to have business relationships with a lot of competitors, and that takes a real skill set, to be able to work.
well, I think the bottom line, Terry Gregg, who I admire, is used to be CEO of Dexcom. Before that, was CEO of MiniMed. He always said that if you put the patient first,
Mhm. Right.
you do pretty well. And that's something else that I look for you know, there's a lot of companies that talk the talk, but don't really walk the walk.
Mhm.
Um,
Right. But don't
and
you think that comes from Al Mann? That was his philosophy with
Al
before it was Medtronic. He was
Al
really,
was a Al was a, what do they call it, an eccentric genius.
he was brilliant. I mean, he really was. You
Yeah.
know, years ago, I just want to share with you, like decades ago, I remember I spoke to him, like I met him at a scientific conference at the AD, and I was speaking to him, and he told me that he researched all the healthcare professionals to see which publications they read. And because a lot of them said, well, whatever percentage, it was a significant statistical percentage that said diabetes health, he decided to invest in diabetes health. And I took that and ran with it, because I was like, gosh, Al, you invested all this money. You did a focus group. You gave me the goods. God bless you.
Well, Al was extraordinary in a lot of sense. People don't realize that he used to tell his team to come up with an 11-year plan.
Wow.
Well, anybody who's now, if you look at what I call the Al Mann tree, which has a lot of great people in it, all of those people will tell you that, back then nobody had 11-year plans. Okay.
Right.
But it forced them to really think, and really forced them to look ahead, to think out of the box. And so that, those are the kind of things you don't, like, just by a compare and contrast. You have companies like a Lilly or like a Novo Nordisk. Now, these are very large diabetes legacy companies. Okay.
Mhm.
There is there's a corporate culture, but there's also management turnover. So if I look, like, for example, like at a Lilly or a Novo, the talent factor isn't as critical because of their size. Now, talent, if you don't have good enough talent, you can't screw up a very good thing, and these companies tend to do that.
Mhm.
But
So do you think the smaller companies do better? Is that what you're implying?
I think smaller companies, strictly from an investment perspective,
Right.
allow you to have a bigger return on your investment.
Right. Which is
So,
what we're looking for.
I would tell people,
Investor.
this all day long. I think Lilly and Novo are very good investments, but they also have, well, Novo is much more diabetes focused.
Mhm.
Lilly also has other arms to it other than diabetes. It just so happened their diabetes portfolio and their pipeline is extraordinarily strong.
Mhm.
So whereas
And they're going to work with Dexcom soon also.
yes, yeah, there's a lot of partnerships going on.
Right.
And whereas I'll contrast that by saying that I probably would not invest in Medtronic, even though they have a significant diabetes presence, because I don't believe, A, I don't believe they're going to be in diabetes forever. And B, I believe that their diabetes franchise has become kind of an albatross. And, this once dominant company is now no longer dominant. And so,
Well, do you think that's because the parent company wasn't really diabetes focused? Weren't they more into like the heart segment,
I mean,
cardiovascular
I
disease?
always say the worst combination in diabetes is arrogance combined with hubris.
Uh-huh.
And Medtronic has a fair amount of that.
Uh-huh.
So, so let's just say that,
Okay.
it was a great business, and
Right. They were the leaders. I mean, they were like,
they were
they
but
were the Google. They really were the Google of our industry
yeah.
back then. I mean, they were so big. Anyone that even dreamed of coming close to them was, you'd say, well, good luck.
Well, but see, now Tandem and Insulin have leapfrogged them and are much better investments than Medtronic.
Right. Well, Tandem, I know, has done, and just as full disclosure, I don't I don't have any investments in any of the diabetes stocks. But I have recommended some, and I have recommended Tandem and Dexcom to my family members, and boy, they love me now.
Well, you know,
Like, yeah, wish I had the upside.
I think I'm a little bit higher on Insulin than I am on Tandem.
Oh, interesting.
Um,
And why? Tell us why.
um, management.
Do you think that has more upside potential in terms of
Well, I think that I do. I think Insulin has more runway ahead of them.
mhm.
I think Tandem, they're very good, and they are worthy of investment. But if I look at a rate of return over, let's say, the next 5 years,
Mhm.
I would say that I would probably, I'd probably get, if I was picking between the two, Insulin, I think you would have a higher rate of return than you would with Tandem.
Interesting.
Well,
Well, they're
Tandem.
killing it in their sales. I mean, I remember, I think
Well,
last
yes
year,
and
they were
no.
like 1,000% over their quota. I mean, they've really
Yeah,
done
no,
amazing stuff.
they're doing quite well. But I think, like I said, I just think the Insulin has more runway, given where they're going and who
And the two that you're saying are Lilly and Novo Nordisk. You haven't said anything about Sanofi. So,
because there's nothing good to say. So,
okay. Well, they're still in business though. I mean, people are still buying and using their
not really. They're gonna get rid of they're gonna either spin off or sell their diabetes franchise.
Okay.
So, I don't, I there's no reason to even include them in the discussion. Companies new that I talk about a lot, Google, Apple, Amazon, Facebook.
But
They're
you're
all,
recommending those as well, just because they're in the health
well,
segment?
I mean, first of all, it's hard to go wrong with Apple or Google. It's
Yeah.
also hard to go wrong with
If you
Amazon.
can afford them, right? I mean, not everyone
Right,
can
right.
afford Google for sure.
It-
Apple, since they've split for, 4 for 1, they're definitely more affordable.
well, I think the most difficult thing to find now is what I call a pure diabetes play.
Mhm.
Now Tandem would be one, Insulet would be another, Dexcom would be another. But a lot of these other, what used to be pure diabetes plays, have ventured into new areas, and which is fine. It's, and like, just as a way of example,
Mhm.
there's a company called MyDiario, and they make a blood glucose meter that attaches to a phone, and now they get an app, and now they're getting into other things. And so they started out, as a diabetes play, but now have morphed into this new, we're a digital health company.
Which really segues, by the way, into the next thing. You haven't mentioned any of the BGM companies except for this one.
Well, first of all, I mean, it's a dying industry. LifeScan is now a privately held company. Roche, I can't say a lot of good things there. I mean, I don't.
People like their meters, though. I mean, they do have, in terms of when you
Yeah,
look
but
at accuracy, I think.
I don't think I wouldn't put my money in any BGM company.
I see. Okay. So from an investment point of view, I guess I went more
Yeah.
for, some people have,
Oh yeah, well,
which one's the best meter, which is the most accurate. And there are a list of them that
yeah,
have
but
been
but
written
first of
about.
all, CGM is becoming the standard for glucose measurement.
Mhm.
It's only a matter of time before, this is, it's not, it's old technology that's, excuse me, outdated and not very valuable. I'm sure whatever buggy whip company that made it all the way in, one.
I love that analogy. So contemporary.
But it's not like
A buggy whip company.
companies
Yes,
that-
and I'm sorry, and bring this up to date.
Well, I'm sure back in the day there were a lot of buggy whip companies,
Yeah.
but there aren't too many now.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I mean, how many VHS companies do you see now? How
Right.
many,
Yeah.
how many people are using a flip phone now? I mean,
Yeah.
we live in a digital world now, and we also live in a world where we have artificial intelligence, advanced analytics, algorithms. So the more data you give these systems, the better they are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, and when you think about it, if you,
Okay, David, I'm going to ask you a question that you asked me on the podcast. And do you think like all of this, the feedback that you're talking about, like the digital feedback, do you think most people value that? Or do you think it's a select group of people that are really entrenched in the technology and they're so excited about it and they love it? Or do you think the masses will adopt it?
I actually believe we're going to have a hybrid model where the mundane stuff can be done digitally. But David Panzera, who I love dearly, Helmsley Trust, Type 1 T1D Exchange. When David was on my podcast, he likes to quote Dean Kamen, and Dean says, "You wouldn't, if you're on a plane, which usually flies on autopilot, I don't think you'd feel real comfortable if you found out that there's no pilot or co-pilot in that cockpit to help take off."
Right. Well, the cruise ships are the same way, by the way.
Yeah.
It's only when they go in and out of ports that they need some navigation.
Right. And so,
Person.
but I do believe, and there is a lot of this, by the way, happens to be regional. You're in the Bay Area, and they I hate to say this, but in Silicon Valley, they don't know what flyover country really is. And somebody in Des Moines, Iowa, or Butte, Montana, or wherever, they're not as digitized as we are here on the West Coast. So I believe that, yes, there are.
So you think that will change though over time? This is where the hybrid will come in?
I don't think it will change as much as anybody, I think it got a lot of attention because of COVID. But we're already seeing evidence. It's now COVID. I don't want to say it's not gone away, but it's going away.
Right.
You're already seeing evidence that patients are going back to their doctor. They want that one-on-one
Connection. Yeah, right. Yeah.
And certain things can't be done digitally. You can't draw blood digitally. You can't.
Well, what do you think about also like the video versus the appointment?
Like I said, the mundane stuff, hey, makes perfect sense. If you're just kind of reviewing somebody's like lab results, hypothetical,
Right. Okay.
But they're like.
But if you need to check to see if they have, their insulin injection sites, if you're looking for something specific, if they're irritated.
Well, there's certain things you just can't see.
Right.
I mean, this is still, just because you do something digitally doesn't mean you get any more time to do it. The average physician visit, it's about 8 minutes. So, if you, I've seen, I've talked to a lot of people around the country, and everybody is seeing this now, is that like, when you go into your physician, they're not just catching, lapses in one thing, they also catch other things. And there's a lot of speculation right now about, is there a tsunami of things coming because patients didn't go to their doctor during COVID?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I do believe that some of the mundane things, just like kind of, reviewing your blood work or, hi, how are you, but there are other things you just can't do And there is a certain level of comfort
Mhm.
to interact with human beings.
Right, right. And I think if anything, COVID has shown how bad isolation is. So we do, and for people that may not have a large community, going out and seeing a healthcare professional could be part of that community for them.
Yes, yeah. And you know, I mean, and let's be honest here, it is very difficult to break people's habits.
Oh yeah, I mean, boy, I mean, it is so hard. It takes so much awareness, and even when you're aware of it, you don't want to stop. You're like, well, I don't care, because the brain always wants the pleasure first, whatever it is. The brain doesn't want to change first because that's discomfort. So unless you recondition your brain and say you don't like not feeling good, for example, then you have an incentive to create change.
Yeah. You know, there's no question it's part of the what I call the healthcare paradigm, but it's not there is no magic bullet here. Okay.
Right.
You know, a couple of years ago, well, more than a couple of years ago, I remember when disease management was all the rage. Well, you don't hear about that now. And that's
Right.
really all digital health is disease management with fancier tools. So I know people hate it when I say this, but the patient is responsible here. You know, I have diabetes. You know, it is manageable. You know, and I say this all the time. I can give every patient the how to do it.
Right.
Give them the want to do it.
Yeah, but David, there are other factors. So, I mean, I could see why people could hate that. I mean, you're someone that's proactive. You have the resources. Not everybody has the resources or education. You have the education. That's a huge component. And then there are some biases in the healthcare professional industry. Like I know with my mom, when I took her to the doctor, I used to get really upset because I could see they look at her as like a fat old lady that just brought it upon herself. And it used to just piss me off. I'm like, you know what? Don't judge her. Who cares? You know, this is kind of where we are.
You know, you're correct. I mean, listen, there's socioeconomic factors, your education factors, you know, but there are, like, I've always divided the diabetic world in three pretty much big buckets. You know, you've got people like me who we're actively engaged with our disease. You know, we're down with it. We get it. We do stuff.
Right. You're proactive and you understand it. I mean, there's medical literacy too, David. Not everybody has medical literacy.
Yeah. And then you got 20% of the patients who, I don't care what you do, they, you know.
Right. Well,
but in the middle, there's about 70% of the patient population. They know they have a chronic disease. They know they have to do something about it. They just want their life to be easier. That's all. And what they want most is not to have diabetes. But since they can't have that,
right, that's right.
What they really would like is they want diabetes for dummies. They want it just to be, you know, they don't want to have to think about it. You know, I'm kind of glad that one of the things that I've seen over the years, it's still present, but not nearly like it was. You don't see the shame of it. You know,
right? Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's true. It's,
you know, we're not lepers. You know, I mean, we have diabetes. You know,
right.
You know.
But I think the medical devices contribute to that. Back in the day, people would take an insulin injection, and some people would take it at the table, and surrounding people that would gawk over felt very uncomfortable with it. Now you can use an insulin pen, or, you know, you've got an insulin pump. It's not as offensive. And the pump looked like the pager when it first came out. So people thought, you know, hey, that person's really important. They got must be a doctor, being paged at dinner.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, first of all, I think the saddest part about, I think and you and I have lived through this, the saddest part to me is here we are, you know, 2021, we have some of the best stuff in the world, and still almost 2/3 of patients aren't under good control.
Right.
So something's going wrong here somewhere.
Right. We haven't figured out the right formula for sure.
Well, and I think, you know, again, you know, you can't solve a problem until you acknowledge you got one. And
Right.
I think part of the problem, I mean, there's so many problems, you know, part of the problem is what I call the type 1 bias. You know, part of the problem is we live in an environment where you can't criticize a patient. I don't know what happened to personal responsibility, but you know, you can't, you know, I mean,
I don't think, see, I don't see it as criticism. I see it as feedback. Everything's feedback. You're doing something, it's not working. It's feedback. It doesn't have to be right or wrong or good or bad. It's just like, hey, whatever you're doing, this is the feedback. So if you want to be over here, you're not. And this is what you need to be to get over here. And that's kind of how I see it. I mean, I don't, because there used to be, you know, there is a non-compliant, remember there was this stamp on the, you know, again, and I think my mom fell in that category where people would look at her and she's like, well, she's non-compliant. Why bother? You know, I'm not going to invest my energy in this person that doesn't show that they care. Well, she cared and she was really bright, but she really didn't get what she didn't get, David. She really didn't.
Well, no, but I understand that, but you can't even say non-compliant anymore. I think the current
Right.
PC,
It's politically incorrect. Yeah.
I think the current PC term is they're not adherent. I don't know, you know.
No. I said that intentionally because it is inflammatory. I use that verbiage intentionally. So listen, we're running out of time. I did want to recap. So the things that you look at when you're looking at a company is the talent and formulary, and the companies that you think that have the most upside for investments are the insulin companies, and the two that you recommend are Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk.
Yeah, if I was picking one stock to buy, I'd buy Dexcom. If I was picking 3 stocks to buy, I'd buy what I call the 3 amigos: Dexcom, Insulin, and Tandem.
I see.
And if I was picking 5 stocks to buy, I would add in Lilly and Novo to that, strictly based on what I believe their rate of return will be over the next 5 years.
Oh, great. All right. Well, David, first of all, we have to thank Miss Deb Kliff for encouraging you to start the publishing company, Diabetic Investor. It has been really interesting, and I really have even though I've known you all these years, this has been really delightful to talk to you. I've learned so much more about you. It's amazing. You don't always know. You don't always know the people as well as you think you know them.
Well, listen, you got me.
Sorry, go ahead.
I said, you got me to shave and wash my hair. You know? So
See, I got pulled with the Diabetic Investor. And I have to say, I love your newsletter. And if people want to, you have a website called davidkliff.com. And
no, diabeticinvestor.com.
Oh, sorry. Diabetic Investor, but you'll always be David Kliff. That's right. You're the diabeticinvestor.com. So you have your podcast there. Yeah. And people can subscribe if they want.
Yep.
And I think you have such a great sense of humor. Some of the people, what they've told me in the industry, they all say, God, the way David writes, it's so funny, it's comical, but when it's directed towards you, it's painful. So you have a comedic twist to the way you do it. And I always love that you have Mama Kliff in there. She's, I think, everybody's favorite.
Yeah.
And thanks to Mama Kliff, you're here.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me.
It was great. Thank you.